everybody wants to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
As artists, we all know the struggle of drawing something really, really beautiful, something that we're very proud of, and it comes time to color it, and we're sitting there like, man, I don't want to ruin this image, and I feel like I'm going to. Many artists feel a little hesitant to color things, and we often find ourselves kind of confused as to what colors to pick. What colors go well together? What color scheme should I use? Well, in today's video, I'm going to teach you all about color theory. That way, by the end of the video, you'll have all the information you need to feel confident when it comes time to color your drawings. So let's kick this right off by describing the two different types of color out there. And that really comes down to subtractive and additive colors. Additive colors are colors that are made directly from a light source, and those colors don't have to bounce off of anything to be seen. So for this, think of something like the sun, your phone, your computer screen, or a fire. Anything at all that makes its own light. The color from that light comes directly from the source, through the sky, and directly into your eyeballs. That's additive colors. Now, subtractive colors work a little bit differently. And this, put simply, is essentially the leftover colors that we get to see after an object has absorbed. The way this one works is essentially you have a light source. We're gonna say the sun. Sure, additive light might come out of the sun and it goes through the sky and it's going to hit our apple here. The apple is then going to take that light, absorb all the colors it wants. And the color that it doesn't want, in this case red, it shoots back into the world and into our eyes. That's subtractive color because the apple subtracted all of the other colors from the color wheel, except for the color red. This is how we see most things. Now, what's awesome about this is additive colors, when they mix to make white. Now, when we take that white light from additive colors and we shoot it into something like a prism or a raindrop, that light hits that reflective surface, bounces in different ways, and we're able to see all of the different colors of the spectrum. And that's how we get rainbows. Now, because of how these colors work, they have different color wheels, and additive colors are going to use red, green, and blue as their primary colors. Once again, going back to the computer screen, if you got really close to your computer, you would be able to see these three different colors. And these three different colors mix together to make any possible color. Subtractive colors, they're a little bit different though. When they mix, they end up making black. And that's because, once again, the process of subtractive colors is that they absorb all of the other colors on the color wheel except for the one they want. Classically speaking, if we were talking about that color wheel, we'd be talking about red, blue, and yellow. You guys would recognize this from your school art classes and various art tutorials. A lot of art books will teach that. And I mean, even my logo for the channel has those primary colors. But there's been a lot of research that's gone into color and how it works. And this is actually one of the best books I've read about color and color theory, which I highly recommend. So the more accurate and newer model of subtractive color wheel is going to be cyan, magenta, and yellow. Now, either one of these, whether you're using the more classic model, the red, blue, and yellow, or you're using the newer model, cyan, magenta, and yellow, regardless of which one you're using, that's going to be great for your pigments. Things like your markers, your oil paints, your spray paints, things along those lines. Now, no matter if you're talking about additive colors or subtractive colors, no primary color on its respective color wheel can be mixed by combining any other colors. So if we were talking about additive colors, you would not be able to make red by mixing any two colors on the additive wheel. If we were talking about subtractive colors, you would not be able to mix yellow by mixing any two colors on the color wheel. Now, if you guys have learned something from this video and you found yourself struggling to learn graffiti, then check out our How to Do Graffiti book in the description down below. It's the only one on the market that'll teach you each one of graffiti's fundamentals, with way too many illustrations for every single lesson. That makes the book great not only for beginners and people just getting into the art form, but just as good for more experienced graffiti artists. Regardless, there's going to be a lesson in there for you, whether it's refining your knowledge of the fundamentals or learning how to flow and add style and evolve your style that you've had for decades now. If you want a copy, check out the description. We have digital copies over on our online store, theartistblock.inc, with physical copies of the book over on Amazon. I got a link to both of those in the description down below. That's pretty much the basics laid down, but from there we got to go into the different properties of color, because color is more than just, you know, red, blue, purple, green, orange. There's a few more properties that get involved here. So what are those properties? Well, color has three properties. You have the actual color itself, which we refer to as hue. That'll be your reds, greens, you know, so on and so forth. From there you have the saturation, and that's going to be how much color does the color actually have. Well, the more color it has, the more pure it is, and the more colorful it looks, the more vibrant, the more vivid it looks. But the less color it has, the more desaturated it is, and the more gray it looks as a result of that. And value is the final property of color. And this is essentially how dark or light the color is, how black or white the color color is. By changing the hue, saturation, and value, you can pretty much arrive at any and all different colors. You might see this in a lot of digital programs where you see quite literally a slider for hue, saturation, and value. Now we're talking about subtractive colors specifically, and we're talking about pigments. There's something else to talk about here. We have tone, shade, and tint. Now tint is when we add pure white to a pure color. And when we do that, we're affecting the saturation of the color. Now shade is when we take a pure color and we add pure black to it. By doing this, we're affecting the value of that color. And tone is a combination of those two things. So by adding gray to a pure color, we're affecting both the saturation and the value of that color. The interesting thing to note here is that the value of the color will only drop down to the gray we mixed into it. If we took a really dark gray, something like a 70%, well then our color will drop its value down to a 70%. But if we went to like a 20% gray, then our color would also go to a 20% gray. In other words, if you want to change your color and you want that color to become like a 50% in value, then you're gonna need to add 50%. Otherwise, if you add like 5% or 10% or 15%, it'll never reach that 50%. Here's where we have to begin talking about contrast. This is a big deal when it comes to really compelling color schemes, and just a big deal in general when it comes to color, and it's actually kind of how we see the world. So contrast just describes the difference between two things. That's all contrast is. And we can contrast between all three different properties of color: hue, saturation, and value. That means we can contrast lighter colors versus darker colors, more saturated colors versus desaturated colors, and we can contrast warm colors versus cool colors. So no matter the color wheel that we're working with, the color wheel can be broken up into warm colors and cool colors. Warm colors essentially have some red or yellow into their actual hue itself, as to where cool colors have some form of blue mixed into that hue. Now warm colors appear closer and they pop more, while cool colors tend to recede and appear further back. That doesn't mean that you can't make cool colors pop or that you can't make warm colors recede, but rather this is more so like the natural state of the color. And it's because of that very nature that warm and cool colors tend to contrast one another. So as you might imagine, saturated colors appear to pop out more and grab more attention and seem closer, while desaturated colors will have the opposite effect. Darker colors will also appear to pop out more and attract more attention than their brighter counterparts. So how do we take all that information and actually utilize it for our image? Well, there's a simple answer for that, and that is color harmonies. Color harmonies are also referred to as color schemes. Think of these as different ways we can group colors together in a way that looks naturally appealing, looks naturally nice. Now, simply having a color harmony isn't an immediate fix. We still have to organize these colors by establishing what's called our key color. Your key color is the one that you want to be the most important, the one that you want to stand out the most, the one that you want to grab the most attention. And while that oftentimes means that it might be the one that occurs the most, that's not always the case. Sometimes your key color might actually occur the least, but it's in an area that has a lot of contrast. And it causes a lot of contrast, which is what makes it the key color. So no matter the color harmony you're using, always think of a key color. All of your other colors in your color harmony are going to work to assist that key color. They're only there as a backdrop. They're only there as a support and nothing else. Sure, it's possible to have two key colors, but understand that is extremely difficult. And what makes having two key colors so difficult is the fact that both of these are going to constantly compete for which one is more dominant than the other. It might create more interest in your image as well, but it'll also make your image clash more. So there's this constant clash that's happening when you try and use two key colors. In short, you don't want the other colors to take your key color's limelight. So what are some ways to make sure our key color stands out? Well, you can make the other colors more desaturated. You can make the other colors lighter in value than your key color, helping the key color to stand out more. Like previously mentioned, you could put your key color around the focal point. That way, it's the thing that people look at the most, even if it occurs less. And in some instances, you can also just make sure your key color happens more than all the other colors, taking a more dominating approach to the actual scene overall. All in all, there's plenty of different ways to make your key color stand out, and you're free to choose how you want to go ahead and do that. You don't need to do all of those at once as well. Alright, so now that we understand what key color is, what are the different color harmonies that we have access to? Well, first we have monochromatic. And monochromatic is essentially, just as it sounds, it's one chroma, one color. So in our monochromatic color scheme, we'll pick one color and then all the other colors will just be variations in value and saturation of that same exact color. Complementary color schemes are colors that are across from one another on the color wheel, and here you should pick just one of these two to be the most dominant one. Now, if your image calls for just more than two colors, you can begin to pick different saturations and values of those two colors in order to help add some variety. Split complementary color schemes is when you pick just one one color, then you go across the color wheel to the opposite side and choose the colors to the left and to the right, giving you a total of 3 different colors. Because you have 2 colors that are on the same side of the color wheel as one another, it works really well to make your key color the one that's opposite of those 2, because that one will naturally contrast the other 2. But of course, that doesn't have to be the case. Now, a triadic color scheme are 3 colors that are spaced equally on the color wheel. This creates a really vibrant color harmony that, in all honesty, can be difficult for a lot of people to control, because these 3 colors will oftentimes have lots of contrast and they'll compete with one another a ton, which means it's really helpful to just slam 2 of those colors with a lot of desaturation to make it very clear what your key color is meant to be. Now, obviously, you don't have to do that, but it certainly helps. Finally, we have analogous color schemes, and these are colors that are positioned right beside one another on the color wheel, and this often gives us a very natural feeling for the color scheme overall, and this is something that we see oftentimes in nature. Now, something I kind of want to throw out there is paint. They're expensive, man. Paints and markers, they are pricey, so we're not always going to have the luxury of having every specific color on the color wheel. So there may be times where, yeah, you know, you just aren't able to get the perfect triadic color scheme or the perfect split complementary color scheme, because maybe your green isn't the right kind of green. But if it's close enough, it'll do. It doesn't have to be precise, it doesn't have to be exact. So now that we talked about picking the actual colors itself, how do we design the inside of our letters? Now, this is where we get kind of into the more graffiti specific things. If any of you guys that are watching this specifically for color theory, feel free to use the chapters below if you're not interested in learning how graffiti artists kind of design the insides of their letters. So interior details, how exactly do we go about that? And what exactly is an interior detail? Now, interior details are just as they sound. They're shapes and other illustrative elements that you'll include inside of the letter or the 3D itself. But I do want to be clear, you don't need to really add interior details at all. There's plenty of examples of pieces with amazing interior detail and just as many examples of pieces with no interior details that look just as awesome. So adding them is really 100% up to you. Now, a lot of amateur graffiti artists will then ask, what interior details do I add? How do I add a specific kind of design? And they'll oftentimes find themselves copying other people's designs. But let's be clear, interior details come in all shapes and sizes and in a wide variety. There's not really a specific kind of detail that's the right one. Creativity is your only limit as far as interior details are concerned. We can draw different shapes, as a lot of people do. This is a really common one. We can draw different textures, like cracks and things of that nature, so on and so forth. We can even shade our letters as well. This is what I particularly like to do. I like to shade and add texture. You can also add a bevel, which many people do, or you can even draw different pictures inside of your graffiti, which isn't as common to see, but it's, once again, it shows us the range of interior details that are out there. Now, I say all this to make it perfectly clear that truly, how we design the inside of our graffiti is limitless. So if you're looking for a guide on what designs to use, then you're missing the point of this video, because we're not here to learn what designs, we're here to learn how to organize any design that we could possibly dream up to help our graffiti. That being said, we're going to keep our design very simple, very typical in this example. That way it's, better and easier to understand for teaching purposes. And the tips I'm about to give are pretty much universal to all interior detail. It's just a quality that interior details can have. So do keep that in mind. So to begin, normally graffiti artists will outline their pieces in black. If you're not outlining your piece in black, then your outline should be one of the other colors in your color harmony. Some interior details like cracks or little slices in the letter, they're oftentimes done just with the outline color. So assuming we're not using the outline color for our interior detail, then we're going to want to make sure our interior detail is one of the colors from our color harmony. By this point, we should have also picked our key color and decided how it's going to stand out from the rest of the colors. If your key color is the base fill-in, then your interior details should help make that color pop. Another thing to keep in mind, especially when using more angular shapes for interior details, you can easily compound and increase line uniformity and similarity by making the lines of your interior detail similar and or uniform to the lines of your letter itself. Doing this helps your flow immensely and with very little effort as well. It's not mandatory, you don't have to do that, but it's one way we can make our interior details kind of work for our fundamentals. Interior details are also great at suggesting structure, so if you kind of find that you're losing a letter in a certain area, you can use an interior detail to kind of rebuild that letter and suggest the structure's existence in that lost area. On the flip side of that, if our interior details become too congested and too kind of cluttered in one area, then we can actually kind of destroy letter structures and make it more confusing confusing and harder to see letter structures. So that's something we're going to want to watch out for. As you become more advanced, you'll find this easier to control and you can still maintain structure despite that high level of detail, but once again, it's something to keep an eye out for. Next up, not all interior details are made with your standard fill-in colors. Sometimes people use the outline color, as we previously mentioned, to make interior details like cracks or little lines that divide structure. When doing things like this, try and keep in mind that our outline color can easily contrast our fill-in color, and as a result of that, these interior details can begin to overpower the actual fill-in. We most often see this with cracks with newer graffiti artists. One of the most important things to remember about interior details is the fact that they are just that. They're a detail, and details in all art forms are useless by nature and they need to be given a reason to exist. Otherwise, they risk hurting the fundamentals. Since your interior details are within your fill-in, the interior detail can simply be there to help the key color, help the graffiti add depth, help to add texture, help to add contrast, so on and so forth. So you don't really need like an elaborate, super deep meaning or reason for the detail to be there. You just need to make sure that your execution as to why it's there is well done. Next tip about interior details in general. If you're shading anything, then follow the fundamentals of shading and form. And if you're adding texture to anything, then be sure to follow the fundamentals of how textures respond to light and form. Otherwise, you risk your textures not really looking convincing, or you risk your lighting and your shading not really looking convincing, which kind of undermines the entire attempt at doing it in the first place and can lower the quality of your work overall. So how do we apply all of this to our actual artwork? And we're going to be using graffiti for this example, but understand this works for your character designs, your landscapes, your portraits, so on and so forth. It doesn't matter what art form we're doing, this works for everything. So let's pretend we've drawn our letters, and we have to fill in our interior details, the 3D, the key line, which is the outline around our outline, and the actual fill-in itself. How might we go about this? The very first step is to pick our color harmony. Are we working with monochromatic? Are we working with complementary colors, split complementary, analogous colors, triadic color scheme? What do we want to work with as far as color harmony is concerned? If we're using a monochromatic color scheme, then we can make any of the sections, that being in this case our fill-in, our interior detail, our 3D, or key line, our key color. In this example, I'm going to make the fill-in the key color. Because of that, our fill-in is going to be the most saturated, our 3D will be much less saturated, with the key line being moderately less saturated than the fill-in, and our interior details can be the least saturated of everything. And I also made them darker in this example. By doing this, we've allowed the fill-in to contrast the 3D and the interior details to help the fill-in pop, and to help our letter structure as a result of that also pop. At the same time, the key line is going to contrast the 3D, and this helps to push the letter forward overall. Of course, we can rearrange all these in any way we'd like, but that's just to demonstrate an example of how we might handle monochromatic. Now let's say we're doing a complementary color scheme and we choose a nice cool color, and then we decide to add a gradient inside of our fill-in, where we're going to take that single cool color and we're going to change its value in saturation to go from lighter to darker. Our interior details are going to be a similar blue, but they're going to be one that contrasts using a far different saturation and value than our actual fill-in color. Our 3D can be a nice warm color, and we'll make our key line a variation of either the warm color or the cool color. The choice is really up to us on what we decide for the key line. Whichever one we choose, we're just going to make it a variation of one of the colors we already have, changing only its saturation and value. Now, I'm only one guy with artist habits of my own, right? I like using certain color schemes, so I thought it'd be great in order to demonstrate and teach using some other people's artwork. That way you guys can learn from different perspectives. So this Acme piece is a great example of a split complementary color scheme. In this piece right here, their yellow is a dominant force in this image. That's definitely the key color. His purple 3D really helps to contrast the yellow and helps the yellow to pop out, and his blue exterior details helps to contrast the yellow through its actual color itself, but the blue contrasts the purple through its value. The orange interior details may be more of an orange than the already established yellow, but this is, as we've said before, where if you don't have necessarily the exact colors, it's alright to use kind of like proximal colors and you'll still be perfectly fine. So as a result of that, the orange isn't really taking too much attention away from the yellow itself. The yellow is still able to be the key color. Now, I really liked this arcade piece. I thought this was an amazing job. The colors are really satisfying, and part of the reason for that is because it's a triadic color scheme. So here, once again, the yellow is a standout color, and it has hints of other colors like browns, oranges, and reds that are pretty similar to yellow. As we've been saying, you don't necessarily need to use things that are an exact match if you don't have things that are an exact match, and you'll still be perfectly fine. Of course, that's assuming that all these extra colors aren't taking attention away from the main color. Keep that in mind. That's really important. On that note, they have a more desaturated blue for the actual 3D, and this helps to contrast the fill-in color. And they have a lime green key line that doesn't contrast the fill-in much, and that's a good thing because it's similar enough to work and not different enough to steal lots of attention. But where it really comes into play is the fact that it helps helps to contrast the magenta, which rounds out the triadic color scheme. And that magenta is much more desaturated than the previous colors, which also helps the name pop off the background a lot, because the blue and the yellow seem as if they're jumping off of that magenta. Now this piece right here is gorgeously colored. I mean, look at that fill-in, it is so nice. And this is a great example of an analogous color scheme. Pretty straightforward and simple as well, but you can see how effective it is. In this piece we have a beautiful blue and green that make a smooth gradation between one another, and all the greens and blues are different values and saturations that help shade and emphasize the piece itself, ultimately making the whole thing jump off the page. Their use of analogous color scheme in the fill-in is strong to where the pink straight letter on the bottom doesn't really pull much attention away at all whatsoever. Your focus still very much is on the piece as a whole. But guys, that pretty much wraps up today's video. If you feel like this video taught you something, then check out our book we have in the description down below. It'll teach you all you need to know about graffiti. It's the only book on the market that goes over all of graffiti's fundamentals, teaches you how to flow, how to find style, and how the art form works. We have digital ebooks on our online store, theartistblock.inc, with physical copies over on Amazon. We have a link to that in the description down below. And if you're looking for more graffiti tutorials, then check out this playlist right up here, where we teach you each one of graffiti's fundamentals that you can apply color theory to, with this right here being more graffiti content for you. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys back here next week.